The History of Communication by Renee Coe. Early communication. The earliest recorded communication amongst human beings was probably cave paintings. It is the one way that people had to leave a record of what was going on in their environment, the purpose of which, however, has been debated by scholars for many, many years. Most of them have come to the agreement that the cave paintings were most likely put up to let others know what animals were safe to eat and which ones weren't. Now, in early communications, there was also storytelling, drum circles, and smoke signals. Most of those were societal, which means that only people within a certain society ever practiced them. And a lot of them were not used widely because of the tendency to draw enemy tribes or animals which could attack and kill you. So the cave paintings, however, were the very first actually recorded proof of communication amongst humans. Written communication came next. And usually only people with proper education were able to understand written communication. You had to be educated in order to write it, and you had to be educated in order to read it. Now, back in the day, all books were handwritten. Prior to the printing press, everything was written by hand. So books were very rare and very scarce. And generally, only the wealthy and the religious were able to enjoy books because of the fact that everyone else was busy trying to survive and make a living. And the literacy rate during this time was very, very low because of that reason. Now, Johann Gutenberg developed the first printing press in 1747, and it revolutionized books. For the first time ever, non-religious books were published. The reason that most books published were religious was because it was a form of worship for the monks that wrote them. And since only the wealthy and the monks were the ones who could read and write, it made sense at the time. Now, along with the written communication, we also look at post offices and letter writing. The United States is the first country to have an established postal system. And the first post office in the United States was established in 1775. And Benjamin Franklin was made the first he was made the first Postmaster General of the United States Postal Service. After the written communication, we move on to telegraphs and telephones. Okay, the telegraph was invented in 1747, and it was not invented by Samuel Morse. It was actually invented by William Watson. Yes, William Watson. Samuel Morse updated the system for sending and receiving telegraphs over great distances in 1837. He also came up with Morse code, which is a series of dots and dashes, because that was the only way you can actually send letters or verbal over the telegraph wires. So each letter in the alphabet was assigned a series of dots and dashes, and when it was received on the other end, the person on the other end would write out what the words were and then deliver the telegraph to the person it had been sent to. The telephone, the modern telephone, was developed by Alexander Bell in 1876, the first modern telephone. Now, it wasn't as popular as he had hoped to start with because the telegraph was already in play. People could send and receive at a lower cost. So a lot of people didn't have the telephone. Part of that was because of the cost. It was $72 a year for telephone service for a corporation and $60 a year for residential telephones. My telephone bill now is about $160 a month. I would prefer the $60, but back in the 1800s, $60 was a lot of money, and a lot of people didn't see the need for something that was useless since they already had the telegraph. The radio. The radio came out in the early 1900s. In 1914, there were a lot of amateur radio broadcasters. It did not become a commercial industry until 1920. and it was completely unregulated until the FCC stepped in 1925. The technology for radios was improving so fast that new radios were generally obsolete within 3 to 6 months of purchase. In 1933, Edwin Armstrong, the father of modern FM radio, came up with frequency modulation for radio, and it completely revolutionized radio once again. After radio was television. Television made its debut in 1939 at the New York World State Fair. In 1940, a 10-inch television screen would cost about $200, making it unattainable for most families. In 1985, over half the households in the United States had a television, and today there's at least one television in almost every house, generally more than that. Television was used mostly for entertainment, and the news has even become entertaining in most places. But the reliance on television is going to have consequences. They might not be here for a while, but they will appear. We're now up to cell phones. In 1973, the first handheld phone was invented by Dr. Martin Cooper. 4 years later, in 1977, cell phones go public. The initial trial population for the cell phone was 2,000 people. Today, over 60 million people in the United States have a cell phone. And with everyone from senior citizens to elementary school students having their own phone, the popularity of the cell phone has increased beyond even Alexander Graham Bell's expectations when he created the first telephone. Now, although it's easy to market the constant contact and having access to everything all the time, one thing you'll never hear about, though, is the stress associated with that contact. The Internet. In 1967, the Internet was developed for military purposes. In 1985, 95% of elementary schools had Internet service in their schools. Internet is massively available. It's available to anybody, and with cell phones and the smart computers we have nowadays, all you have to do is touch a button, type in what you want to look up, and it's there instantaneously. Internet has surpassed television as a means of popularity and entertainment. Blogging and social media. The first weblog or blog was developed in 1997. Blogs are quickly replacing journals as a form of communication and venting for adolescents. Instead of writing their problems in a book, they write it on a computer. Everybody gets to see what's going on. Now, this is not necessarily a good thing, because when you are so dependent and reliant on communication being electronic, you lose reality. You lose the sense of reality that comes with actually interacting with other people. The impact of social media has not yet been completely investigated, but it is necessary for society and for corporations to have internet access and to be able to do the social media and blogging. If you have a product you want to market to a young adult, you find them on the internet. That's where you need to put it. As you can see from this presentation, the communication has evolved dramatically since the caveman and the cave paintings. Today, this is a modern world where everything is done online or through the internet. You don't even need to know how to add or subtract anymore. You just type it into your computer and it tells you the answer. What does this mean and why does this matter? This means that although communication is necessary for the survival of the human race, have we really taken it too far? Have we become so dependent upon technology and the interactions and communications that it provides that we have forgotten how to communicate amongst each other? And what's next? I don't know what is next, but I can tell you that technology is continuing to advance, and therefore our forms of communication will continue to evolve right along with it. My daughter came to me the other night, and she made a very valid point. She said, the young people today rely too much on technology. My generation can write the most wonderful job resumes ever, but we can't communicate the information we need to in person. And that says a lot coming from a 19-year-old kid. because they are so reliant on technology to do things for them that they're missing out on the developmental part of actually communicating with others. And what will we do? I personally am going to continue to talk to my kids instead of trying to contact them through email or text messages, because you get more information and you're actually spending time together and making stronger connections.